would be great. So anyway, determining your real estate investing strategy. I speak quite a bit about this. I'm very, very passionate about helping people understand the why of real estate. And all of you are in this room because you're interested, but I'm really going to get into a bit about why and the different types of strategies on a very high level, the different types of strategies you can pursue. So before I get into it, though, I do want to ask, excuse me, I'm trying, is it showing? No, hang on. There we go. Raise your hand if you have a pre-tax retirement account, like a 401k, IRA, anything? Okay, so do I. We're very good following what society has taught us to do, right? We are all taught this is what you do. You invest in pre-tax retirement accounts. And if you have an employer match, it's a fantastic thing to do. I mean, that's 100% return on your money right away. You should be doing that. But beyond your employer match, I would question as to whether that's the highest and best use of your capital. And that's because when you invest in a pre-tax retirement account, you're in partnership with the government. And they're the general partner, you're the limited partner. So you have no idea what your tax rate's going to be by the time you're of age and ready to retire. So you actually don't know how much is actually in those accounts. So it's important to really be intentional and think, okay, employer match, great. Beyond that, maybe real estate's a better solution. Anyone in here have kids? Anyone have a 529 account for them? A few of us, yeah. This is another thing where it's important to understand that by 2036, private universities are going to cost over $300,000 and public universities are going to cost about $180,000. So I have 6- and 7-year-old daughters, so these are very real numbers for me. We'll see if it even makes sense at that point. But it is important to understand if college is something you want to help your children do. It's important to understand what those numbers are really mean. And the reality is these 529 accounts have mandates in terms of what you can't diversify and you can't dictate the investments that are made through the 529 account. These are state mandated in terms of the types of investments you can make. So you're really at the whim of them. And I don't know how your 529s are doing. We do have one, and it's not pretty. Yeah. We'll see if 1 year can get paid for by the time my kid's in college. So we're looking at the value of everything going up, all of us, right? We've got the rate of inflation. We've got the high cost of everything today. We know that it's just going to continue to get this way, especially considering what's happening with the Fed. The Fed is cutting rates despite the fact that inflation is going up. So we know what's coming. So it's important to really think about, all right, with the cost of everything going up the way it is, I need to be more intentional than ever. And I truly believe more intentional today than our parents had to be. We're in a different world now. We have to be more intentional and really financially educated. And so, the whole notion of work, pay taxes, pay a lot of taxes, work, grind, trade your time for money for 40 years, then save, invest in retirement accounts, pre-tax retirement accounts, put your money in brokerage accounts. They don't need to necessarily be paying dividends, and then work and you can retire around 65. That paradigm is what we were taught. It's what we were programmed to think, and it doesn't work the way that it used to. And I think we're all in this room because we know that. But the question then becomes, all right, how do we break ourselves out of the matrix, right? How do we reprogram ourselves? And before I give you that solution, I want to talk a little bit about the origin of our education, because a lot of people don't know, why are we so programmed? Like, why do we think this? And this was very intentional. The modern day education system was created during the Industrial Revolution, as a result of the Industrial Revolution. At the time, it was all of a sudden, as these industrialists began to create these factories, there was a sudden need for a massive workforce that was literate and punctual and showed up on time and took orders from someone that wasn't in their family. And this was this is late 1700s, 1800s. This was very unusual because prior to that, everyone was taught at home. And they worked at home, and they were educated at home. And unless you were extremely wealthy, you never got a formal education. So everything happened at home back then. So the idea of leaving your home and going to take orders from someone else was just a non-starter. Like, why would I do that? And so it was tough. And so it was actually the Prussian factory owners that came up with the schools. And you could take kids at young ages, get them to all do what you say, when you say, ding a bell, they'll go do this, ding another bell, they'll go do that. And you'll program them to start to behave in a certain way. So we'll make mass numbers of people, millions of people, literate, punctual, they'll take orders, and they will show up on time, usually. And so that compliance, they needed people to do. It was hugely successful, as we all know. It spread like wildfire through the Western civilization. These factory-style schools were created. It was incredibly successful, and we stand on the shoulders of the industrialists. So at the time, it did exactly what it needed to do. It made millions of people literate, punctual order takers. But the problem is that factory-style education system still exists today. So we are still being educated in the same way. So I talk a lot on social media as well as to people like us every day. And I'm constantly asked, why aren't we taught financial education in school? And this is why. School was not created to teach us technical skills like financial education. School was taught to make us social, punctual order takers. And it works really well. And as a society, we all become great workers. We're programmed factory workers, really. we become this because that's what school teaches us to be. And we were not taught to be good stewards of our capital. That's nowhere in the curriculum, and I truly don't believe it ever will be in the normal education, the mass education system that we're in. So many of us then end up feeling like we're on this sort of financial treadmill. Trading your time is only so scalable. There's only so much money, so many hours you can work. Only if you're a doctor, only so many procedures you can do. If you're an attorney, only so many hours you can bill. And you need your money to be working harder for you than ever because of the inflationary environment that we're in. And so with the expectations of the future and what our costs are today, we're all in this room, I know, because we know that there's something better out there and we need to educate ourselves. And I just want to share this story because this was my personal shift in life. I grew up in a great family. I have wonderful parents, and they worked really hard for 40 years with all the retirement accounts and brokerage accounts and never been invested for passive income. I would say my parents were never very intentional investors. They saved, they did everything they were programmed to do. They were ready for retirement, and then my mom got sick and died 6 months after retirement. And that was my huge shift in life where I said, whoa, my husband and I are on the exact same page. We're doing the same thing. We're plowing money into our retirement accounts. We're not even paying attention to, we're only investing in public equities at the time, really. And even then, we weren't really paying attention to anything, if anything was dividend earning. We were just, let's just do this. We'll just keep looking at numbers grow on the screen. And someday, we will really enjoy our lives. And that was the path we were on until this happened. And it was really my massive shift. And after we started implementing this as a family, I started sharing this with people in my lives, which is why I'm here today, because I truly, truly believe that this message needs to be into everybody's ears. So we're here. We're going to break the paradigm. That's why we're standing in this room. We are going to throw it all out the window, break ourselves out of the matrix. We know we've been programmed. And now we are going to make some changes because we don't need to wait until we look like this to enjoy our lives. Although I do plan to be as cool as her at that age, I would like it to be a little sooner. So let's just change the narrative. We can all retire when our passive income exceeds our living expenses. And we have to think of our investing as every asset we buy that pays cash flow is a day we're buying back in our future. But I talk to a lot of people that tell me, I don't want to quit working. I love it. I just talked to a doctor a couple weeks ago. He's like, I really like my job. I just want less pressure. So he's like, I just don't want to have to maybe do quite so many surgeries. Or if I want to take some time off, I can, and I have enough passive coming in that I don't have to worry about my expenses. I spoke to another person who's a consultant at a big firm. He's like, I like climbing the corporate ladder. I'm ready, but I just want the pressure off if there's a big layoff event or if that big client doesn't sign. I'm not worried about keeping my house and my family. So I think whatever your goal is, whether it's retiring and hanging out on a beach early on, or whether it's just taking the pressure off of your day-to-day work, it's important to think about your investing in terms of this. So you must, as I said, become an intentional investor. So, all right, I've beat a dead horse. Now, how? That's the question. How do I do that? How do I create a strategy? And I think we're all here because we do believe that real estate is a big part of that strategy. So I want to run through, why real estate, the big thing, and Boomer just hit it over the head for a while, but the tax advantages. I have a lot of people who come to me and say, oh, well, that property is paying 15% annual, like I'm getting 20 in the stock market. Yeah, but the tax rates are completely different. You're talking about a portion of that return being tax-free from your real estate, and you're paying capital gains on your portfolio. So it isn't equitable, and it's really important to understand that. And then real estate offers passive income, velocity of capital, capital appreciation. I'm going to touch on each of these in a second, but there's various ways that you can invest in terms of your strategy and continue to grow. And I also love about real estate that it's relatively easy to exit. You don't, maybe not at your price, but there's always a buyer for real estate. And I think that that's important. If anyone's been in another type of business and maybe wanted to exit, maybe being with a partner that you don't want to be a partner with, it's more difficult to do than real estate. And so I really like that about the asset class as well. And when we talk about real estate too, we should think of it as packaged commodities: lumber, glass, copper, steel. That's very valuable. The price of those commodities are not going down. So when you buy an asset like this, you think of it as packaged commodities. Those components, the price of them are not going down anytime soon. Well, they're never going down, let's be honest. So if you think of it as packaged commodities, it's even more attractive as we look at the price of commodities going up. And then it's relatively recession resistant. If you've got a strategy for passive income and you don't really care about the value of the property, you just want the passive, it's very recession resistant. I'm specifically talking about multifamily. Even in the greatest real estate crisis in US history, in 2008, 2009, multifamily rents stayed relatively flat. Well, obviously the value of single family we saw plummet. So that's another reason why I particularly like multifamily. I'm not going to speak about that side of it here today, but I like multifamily because it's pretty recession resistant. And then leverage. You can buy a $100,000 home for $20,000. You're never going to buy $100,000 in Apple stock for $20,000. So that's the leverage component is really exciting and something you don't see in other places. And then again, just going a little deeper into why real estate. You've got the passive income, you've got the tax advantages, principal pay down. Your tenant is paying your principal down, paying your mortgage down. The property does appreciate in value. And then inflation-induced debt destruction. I don't know if you've heard that term. It's Jason Hartman is a great thought leader in real estate, and you should all follow him. Inflation-induced debt destruction. Essentially, it means if you take out a $500,000 loan with the rate of inflation where it's at, the value of that loan is going down. So it's fantastic in that sense because inflation's eating away at your loan and the purchasing power of that amount. So it's helpful in that sense too. And then real estate professional status, I could do an entire separate talk on. It's one of the great wonders of the world, in my opinion. But there's rules around it. People like Boomer are best friends to people who are real estate professional status. But I will tell you, I live in California, and our tax rate has plummeted since I became real estate professional status. But again, that's maybe another talk. I'll come out another time for that. But then again, leverage, bearing in mind you always, as you get into this and as you dive more into real estate, you got to get comfortable with debt. As long as you're buying assets and someone else is paying that debt and you're not having to trade your time for money or trade your time to pay that debt is good. Because remember, you take out a loan on a property, you participate in 100% of the appreciation of that property, but your debt is fixed. So it's a great deal as long as you're being responsible with your debt choices. And there's so many options in real estate, as we all know, active versus passive. Active is like what Erica's doing with her 4-unit right now. She's, or 3-unit, excuse me. But when you buy a property, you take out the loan, you manage it yourself, or you hire a property manager. That's what they call active investing, right? There's also passive investing. If you're like, look, I'm busy, I don't want to deal with tenants and toilets, but I do want to participate in real estate and I do want appreciation, you can invest passively through operators like, I'm part of an operator, and you can keep it more hands-off in terms of your real estate participation. And then as we all know, you can do long-term versus short-term rentals, residential versus commercial, private money lending. house flipping, house hacking. There's lots of options, and that's another reason why I like real estate. You can really figure out what it is you like, and by the way, I do a lot of this. You don't have to choose one, of course. So let's get into the strategy. I'm always surprised at how few people think in this way, and so I talk to investors all day long, every day. So I want to share the 3 buckets of strategy, and then you can think about what it is that you want your strategy to be. So strategy number 1 is investing for yield. That's investing for passive income. You're making an investment, and you know that it's going to pay you whatever the percent back, let's say 7%, and you know what that's going to be. Or you're investing for, you're buying a dividend-paying stock, and you know what that dividend is going to be. You're investing for yield. So like, I'm buying this stock because I know it's going to pay, it's going to pay me a dividend. Okay, that's great. You're investing for yield. And then you invest in a private business, and when you're making that investment, they say, we're going to pay you, $5,000 a month in a distribution. Okay, great. So that's, again, investing for yield. And before you start any investment, before you make any purchase, you want to make sure that you know which bucket this sits in, which strategy. So strategy number 2 is velocity of capital, investing for velocity of capital. I'm going to speak about that as it comes to real estate. But essentially, velocity of capital is how quickly can I put my money in, refinance, get it back, and redeploy it. That's what we consider velocity of capital. And then the 3rd strategy is capital appreciation. When you're buying in New York, or you're buying in Los Angeles, you are not going to cash flow, very unlikely, at least in the onset, unless you're doing a very heavy lift, like Erica's doing. So that's, but you're buying for capital appreciation. When you're investing in a non-dividend paying stock, you're investing for capital appreciation. You're going to watch the number go up on your screen, but you're not going to get anything back. You know ahead of time, I'm investing for capital appreciation. And then, venture capital. I don't know if any of you have made some. I've made some venture capital investments, and I know I'm not going to see anything for a while, but hoping that capital appreciates and doesn't go to 0. So I'm going to give some specific numbers, because Erica asked me to, on how we look at things. So when I was starting the process, when my husband and I sat down, we're like, okay, what's our strategy here? What's something tangible that will actually get us excited? We said, okay, what if and we want income today. What if we invest for passive income to cover our child's private school education? And maybe that will be our first goal. We want passive income to pay for our child's private school education. That's going to be step 1. So then we had a number in mind. So okay, her private school education is $40,000 a year. So okay, how much capital do we need to deploy at an 8% annualized return to get $40,000 a year? So there's very simple math here, as we can see. At $500,000, 8% annualized return will give us $40,000 per year. Again, this is a very simple math, investing for passive income, aka investing for yield. If this is the type of strategy you want, it's more predictable. You're not going to see those huge hockey stick growths, but you're going to see predictable returns. So I'm going to give you an example of an investment that we made for yield. So this is an apartment building we bought in Kansas City. Just closed this in December. 60 units. It's in, again, Kansas City. And the purchase price was $6.6 million. We bought it with a lot of other investors. And we knew the cash-on-cash return would be 7.5%. And then the internal rate of return, just think of that for simplicity's sake as annualized return, is 15%. So we knew ahead of time. I called it a steady Eddie deal. Is this going to be hockey stick growth and something, wow, this changed our lives? No, but it will pay us consistently. It's a solid 1989 asset, and it will produce for us monthly, which again, going back to what I just described, if we can get that $3,000 a month, we'll pay for our daughter's private education or private school. So that's what the expectation is. We invested $150,000 at a 7.5% annualized return. About $937 a month is what we expect to get when it starts distributing. So very simple. I do all of these strategies. It's just important to know the first thing when you're looking at a deal, is this a passive income? Is this a yield deal? Is this a velocity of capital deal? Or is this a capital appreciation deal? And there's the Venn diagram is very real on the velocity of capital and the capital appreciation. I'm sure you can know that. And then the velocity of capital, if you're not familiar with the BRRRR strategy, you definitely need to look it up and understand it. Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. Very common strategy amongst experienced real estate investors, so absolutely look it up. A BRRRR that we just did, we closed a 40-unit Grandview Townhomes apartments, another in Kansas City, a 40-unit, again, not 40-unit, 40 townhomes, and we bought, it was 60% occupied when we bought it, so it was highly distressed, and we knew that. It was a perfect candidate for a BRRRR, for velocity of capital. So we had bought it actually with investors from New York, and I'm in California, investors in California, and then a couple of investors in Atlanta. And the purchase price was $3.2 million. We raised, amongst the investors, we put together $1.7 million. And after we've complete renovation, which we expect to be about 18 months after purchase, it's going to be worth, we expect around $6.3 million. And at that point, we're going to refinance. We're going to take a 70% loan to value. And that's going to be for a $4.4 million loan that we'll then take out, and we will return some capital to investors and then pay off the existing loan. So that's velocity of capital because I invested in April, and by December this year, I will have capital returned to me. Even though we still own it, we're not selling it. We're refinancing and pulling out the equity that we invested. So that's velocity of capital. Again, how quickly can you invest, refinance, and pull money out? And then capital appreciation. This is what most people do who are highly invested in paper, in public equities, in stocks. They're investing for capital appreciation. They're not looking for dividends. They're just wanting the number on the screen to get bigger and feeling good about that. And that's not bad, by the way. I want you guys to understand the way to think about your investments because I think you can be, again, more intentional once you really understand it. And then in Los Angeles, an 8-unit is $400,000 a door. So you're not going to get a lot of cash flow on that unless it's a big heavy lift, again, like Erica's doing. So an example here of capital appreciation, you have a turnkey 8-unit in Los Angeles. Turnkey means it's already ready for tenants to move in. I didn't acquire this, so I'm making up the numbers. I know what the rent roll was, but I didn't buy this. So, but the asking price is $3.2 million again. So on a basic 75% loan to value, again, these are numbers for example purposes. You would be paying $800,000 down payment, $2.4 million loan, and you've got the gross rents minus the expenses inclusive of your mortgage, and you've got a net of $45,000 per year on your $800,000 in invested capital. So that's a 5.7% return on equity. And it's important to think about that. What is the return on the capital you're putting in? And this is if there are no major maintenance problems. And also in Los Angeles, there's major rent control concessions. So this is also if everyone pays the rent. And it's very difficult to raise the rents even if your expenses go up. So, all right, you get the strategies. How do you source the capital? And I think a lot of people are sitting on capital that you don't even think about as being capital you can use. So there's two ways. I speak to investors all day long, every day. So there are two primary ways I have seen people, like the people in this room, be able to source capital that they didn't even realize they had. So the first way is by unlocking the capital in your public equities. And what I mean by that is obtaining a securities-based line of credit using your stock portfolio as collateral. So you don't have to sell your stock if you want access to the money. I'll give you a very sad example. A friend of mine didn't know about securities-based line of credit in the early 2000s, and he sold a lot of his Apple stock to pay for his primary residence. That would have been worth over $10 million, the stock, and he had no idea he could have just borrowed against his portfolio as opposed to selling it. So this is where financial education is extremely, extremely important. Know your options. So an example, if you have a $500,000 stock portfolio, depending on the financial institution, very, very dependent on that, you can borrow up to $250,000. Maybe, again, check with your financial institution, but in this particular situation, in mine, we could borrow up to $250,000 at a 6% interest rate. So if you take that, and you take that $250,000, you can make an investment at, let's say, earning you 7.5%. You can use it to, I've got a private money lending opportunity where I will borrow at 6% off my security-based line of credit, and then I will lend at 12% to this person who needs 3-month increments of capital, and then he pays me back and we start over. So, and then I just pocket the delta. So there's no money out of my pocket doing this, and it's really just a fantastic utilization of the securities-based line of credit. So this is just an important to understand that, because I think a lot of people, myself included prior to my real estate journey, most of our capital was locked up in the stock market and we didn't want to sell it. And the other thing that I see quite frequently is if you have a rental, let's say, and you've had it for a long time. I spoke to someone just the other day who had a rental and he couldn't decide if he should sell it or what he should do with it. And so I asked him, what's the net cash flow on this condo? And he said it was $1,000 a month after he paid his mortgage and the HOAs and everything. I said, okay, $1,000. What's the condo value? $500. What do you owe on it? $150. Okay, so he's got $350,000 in equity, and he makes about 12 grand a year in cash flow. So doing basic math, he's earning 3.4% on that condo, on the equity in that condo. Is that good? No, but there's the question comes: do you sell it and redeploy the equity? Excuse me, he can sell it, net about 350, and then put it into another investment, or he can refinance, pull up some of the equity, and then put it into a new investment. But certainly having it sit there isn't an intentional way to be investing. So I'm coming to the end, but one of the things that I really have been inspired by people, 30 years, 40 years, even 50 years down the line from where I'm at, is really the notion of just thinking about how you can design your life. And again, it doesn't mean like quit your job and go live on a beach at all. It's just a matter of, okay, how can I invest in a way that will be more intentional so that I can design the life that I want? Maybe I want a position where I'm taking fewer surgeries, and my husband's a doctor, so I'm always thinking in the physician mindset, but or take fewer hours, in the hospital or whatever it is. But thinking about it, what do I need to do to achieve that and make me comfortable with that? And just this whole idea of just continuing to grind away for 40 years and then don't worry, at some point you'll enjoy a great retirement. It didn't work for my mom, and so it's not guaranteed to any of us. So I think just waking up and being intentional with your money and breaking yourself out of the program, which you're in this room, so you've already done that, is really important. And one of my favorite quotes is from Jeff Weiner, and he's the executive chairman at LinkedIn, but he says, one of the things I'm most excited about or most proud of in my life is the fact that I get up in the morning excited to go to work, and then I leave work excited to go home. And I think that that's just such an incredible way to think. And when I heard him say that, I'm like, yes, that's what I want. It's so just being open and having that goal in mind, whatever that goal looks like for you, is important. And my favorite quote, the best investment on earth is earth. They're not making any more of it. Just educating yourself, which you're all doing here, is the first step, and then just getting really intentional beyond it. So I thank you so much. Please, there's my email address. Please, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn. Please follow me there. We do have one passive investment opportunity open right now. I'm actually working with Erica on. If you are interested, I have a couple spaces open, and I wanted to leave them open in case anyone in the room is interested in passive real estate investing. I'm investing in it. Actually, Christine's investing in it as well. But if you're interested, please schedule some time with me, and we can talk through it and see if it's the right fit for your strategy. And the last thing I'll say is I do some real estate coaching. I have a coaching program coming up in a few weeks, starting January 30th. It's an 8-week guided study program. In 3 hours a week, my partner and I teach you how to invest in real estate and buy your first property within 120 days. And we're really, really proud of the success rate of our students. So if you're ready to go, but you still feel like you need the education, please join us January 30th. That's the website. And I would love to work with you and guide you to that first property, because once you get bit by the bug, as Erica said, there's no turning back. That's it. Mm-hmm. So are there any questions? Anyone? I know there's a lot of talking, a lot of sitting. All right, yes?
This is probably going to open a whole can of worms, but any advice for, somebody who's interested in maybe being a private money lender? Like first steps or something?
Yeah. I don't know if you...
Talk to me later. Okay.
Yeah, it really, it's such a trust game. And, I know you do commercial, it's strictly commercial, right? So it really is a trust game, at least it was for me. And in the sense of, there's an operator that I knew that wanted EMD loans, and earnest money deposit, EMD loans. So those are short 90-day loans, pay a higher interest rate, but I have no collateral on that. So it's very risky. If you're doing private money lending on and I'm speaking for residential, not commercial, if you're doing private money lending on fix and flips, it's a great deal. I mean, because you are taking a first position lien on a highly discounted property, and that's, to me, once you have that first position lien on the property, it's way less risky. I mean, then in that case, God forbid that person doesn't pay the bill, you can take possession and sell it yourself. So, but yeah, I know you can go ahead and connect after this. There's a lot of networking groups out there around this, but it depends on what type of private money lending you want to do.
Potentially also a question for the room, but do you have recommendations for tax people who can help give you, based on your personal situation, like advice on all of the different components?
Yeah, I absolutely love my tax person, but he is inundated by everyone I've sent to him. So he's actually been less responsive recently, but I do think for the room, if anyone has, it's got to be a real estate accountant. I think that's a really important thing that it took me time to learn. I was paying a lot of money to my previous accountant, and then when I made the shift into real estate, I didn't bother to ensure that my CPA was knowledgeable around this, and my mother was a CPA, and she knew nothing about this. So it's not all CPAs know this by any means. So when you are finding someone and interviewing potential CPAs, asking them, if they are real estate focused. I'll give you an example. My previous CPA that we were paying a lot of money to, when I got educated and started asking him questions as a test, I emailed him and said, I think I'm going to sell this property. What's my tax liability going to be? And I was waiting for him to tell me, well, you can do a 1031 exchange or give me some tax strategy. He emailed me and said, oh, you'll owe about 40 grand. And I said, well, you're fired. So it's important, it's not only a CPA, but it's also a tax strategist, and not everybody does that. And so it's really about finding a tax strategist who will meet with you maybe a couple times a year, and then they can do your taxes. But I have found that paying for a good strategist is worth its weight. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. I wish I had, I don't want to send you to him because he probably won't respond, and then, but anyone in the room who has a good one, please send them over. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you.
All right, thanks, guys.